Hello and welcome. I am Karina Lesser, the Artistic Director of Scripps Presents. And I think you'll be able to believe it, but this is the first event we've had in Garrison Theater in over 2 years. So it's just so, yay! It's so amazing to have you all here, but I do want to give a nod to our audience from afar. We are live streaming this program as well. So thanks everyone for being here. Scripps Presents seeks to complement the dynamic humanities curriculum at the college by bringing the most thoughtful and timely writers, artists, and scholars into conversation with our community. We are committed to creating a forum for dialogue and reflection on the most critical issues of our times. It's also an opportunity for us to partner with organizations like PEN America, who champion the freedom to write. A special thank you to our California-based PEN staffers, Jen Dees and Geraldine and Noah, who are here with us tonight, and also Jared Jackson and Clarice Rosaz Sharif, who are in New York. I also want to give a special shout out to our in-house technical team. I mentioned the live stream, and so Cam and Jake and Kevin and Rob, thank you so much for making this happen. And now I would like to introduce you to our wonderful guests. Julisa Arce is the nationally recognized author, sought-after speaker, producer, and social change maker. She is the best-selling author of My Underground American Dream and Someone Like Me. Arce is a Crooked Media contributor and a frequent writer for Time magazine and has provided political commentary across numerous TV networks, including NBC News, Bloomberg TV, CNN, and MSNBC. She is the co-founder of the Ascend Educational Fund, a college scholarship and mentorship program for immigrant students regardless of their immigration status. She's here kicking off the tour for her latest book, You Sound Like a White Girl, of which Kirkus Reviews writes in its starred review, "This is an important book that challenges the idea of American exceptionalism with equal parts passion, fury, intimacy, and ignored history." Arce celebrates the Mexican-American immigrant experience in all its vibrancy and nuance, while fearlessly naming the pain inflicted by American racism, ethnocentrism, and xenophobia. An essential read to better understand America and its immigrant stories. Tonight, she'll be joined in conversation by Aida Rodriguez, a comedian, actress, and producer. Rodriguez's first stand-up special, Fighting Words, is streaming on HBO Max, and she recently signed with Odenkirk Provisario Entertainment. A few housekeeping notes. We want to hear from you, our audience. Following Julisa and Aida's conversation, we'll have a standing mic available for questions, just right here. Please line up, and we will do our best to get to as many of those questions as possible. Important note, masks worn properly over your mouth and nose are required for the duration of the program, including during Q&A. Please also note the several exits to the hall and the closest one to your seat. And now, without further ado, Julisa and Aida. Welcome to the Scripps Presents stage.
Thank you.
Give it up for her one more time.
Oh.
So before we get started, you're going to read?
Yeah, I'm going to do a little reading and just want to say thank you to everyone that is here. I always think that only 5 people are going to show up, and so I'm like always very nervous before I come out. So it's really great to see all of you here. So I'm going to read a little section from the book, and then Aida's going to have some fire questions. This is from a section called Reclaiming Our Culture. We don't need a translator. As a writer, I am constantly asked to make my stories more relevant. But relevant to whom? To make them more appealing to a mainstream audience. And I know that's not coded language for larger, it's coded language for a white audience. To make them less angry, but it's not anger that is in my words, it is truth. All I want to do is write stories that make sense to people like me, people who have had to answer a million questions just to make others comfortable. Freedom from the white gaze is what I desire. I don't want to translate my experiences so they make sense to other people. I want to write about heroes that look like us, speak like us, and triumph despite every possible challenge they face. People whose humanity is recognized without the white stamp of approval. I'm gonna skip ahead, but I know you guys are getting the book, so you read about that time I met Oprah. I love HGTV shows. They are my wine and chocolate. I particularly like the remodeling shows. There's something so satisfying about seeing beauty blossom where once there was nothing but ugliness. Those transformations are made possible by mostly Latino men. You catch a glimpse of their hands as they put in new floors, or see the back of their baseball hats as they install a backsplash in the kitchen. But you never hear them speak. It bothers me that the camera can't even show their full faces or their whole bodies. We only see their labor. That's what we are to America, fragments. Newspapers write only about the most moving narratives or the most salacious. My own story has been used to propel the myth of a perfect immigrant. I tell reporters and documentary directors the nuances of my life, how it wasn't all roses. I emphasize the thorns. But when I see their finished work, it's like the Rose Day Parade. I struggle with how my life is used as inspiration for us, but also as a form of pandering to white people. But my intentions with my own work, with my own words, is clear. My hope is that my stories will help students take up space in their classrooms, in their neighborhoods, and in this country. I want my community not to have to explain. I want us to simply be able to exist. We cannot make ourselves or allow others to make us small so we can fit in the minds and hearts of white people. America might never love us back, so we must love ourselves.
Amen. So the first thing I want to ask is, I know we can all agree that all of us have experienced this collective trauma in the last few years with the political climate and all of the things that have been happening, not just domestically, but globally. Why this book? Why this story now?
So, the title of the book, and this is how far it goes back for me, of why this book now. The title of the book, You Sound Like a White Girl, comes from this boy in high school that I had a crush on, told me I sounded like a white girl. And when he said that to me, he didn't mean it as a compliment, but I took it as one, because I had spent so long trying to enunciate my words so that I sounded like I was from here. And from here to me meant that you were a white person, right? Because it's only white people whose Americanness is never in question. For the rest of us, we always have to answer that proverbial question, where are you from? No, but I mean, where are you from, right? How many of us have heard that question? And so, since I was 14 years old, this idea of having to fit into a very narrow definition of American has been in my mind. And over time, I did assimilate in many ways, and now I'm making the case for why we should reject assimilation, but in many ways I did assimilate. And you look at what's happening today. I dedicated the book to the people of El Paso, Texas, because of what happened there on August 3rd, 2019, which is a day that I will never forget, when 23 mostly Mexican-American, mostly Latino people were shot and killed by a white supremacist. And it was so clear to me in that moment that it's never been about whether we're in this country legally, whether we've assimilated, whether we speak English, whether we have successful careers. All that matters in the eyes of some people will always be our skin color and what they perceive, how they perceive us to be foreigners and invaders in their country. Never mind that this happened in Texas, land that was formerly Mexican land that was indigenous land, where my ancestors are from. And so this book to me is so important right now because this idea that assimilation can give us belonging continues to be spread in every corner of this country, and it's a lie. Yeah. And I think that for too long, we have also believed that we can find belonging, that we can find protection in whiteness and in proximity to whiteness. I know that I did, I believe that, maybe unconsciously, but I did. And so I think the time has come for both white people, but also for us to recognize how much damage assimilation does.
So when we were backstage, you said you were a little nervous because you wanted to get it out of your body. Who did you write that book for?
Yeah, when you write a book, I've been thinking about this book probably for 5 years. And then I did years of research, and then I actually sat down at my computer to write March 2020. So right when lockdown was happening. And then, that was 2 years ago. And then it's the editing process, and then it's all the months of anticipation to finally be sitting in this room with the book in hand. And it's a long process, and that whole time, it's just mine. But today, it becomes your book. Today is not my work anymore. Today is the book that you hold and what you are going to make out of this book, the conversations that you're going to start with this book. And I don't in the book, I say we a lot, and I don't ever define who we is, because to me it's just understood that we is my community, right? I don't translate any of the words that are in Spanish. All the Spanish words are not italicized because I don't find Spanish to be this exotic thing. So I wrote the book for us and for the choir. I think a lot of times we say we've got to preach beyond the choir. But I also think that the choir needs to be energized, and the choir needs to be seen and loved and understood. And so the book is for the choir. And if you are a non-Latino person who is an ally, who believes in justice and equality, then this book is also for you. And you'll learn some things, and I hope that it makes a lot of us uncomfortable, because I do talk a lot about uncomfortable truths. But I also think that if we're ever going to make this country truly be a place for all of us, we probably need to get a little uncomfortable.
That's right. If you could give people your definition of what assimilation is, what would it be?
So, to me, assimilation is about shedding the things that make you who you are for the illusion of becoming something else. Right? There's an example I give in the book about a snake, right? And a snake sheds its skin, but it still remains a snake, right? It gets new skin, but it still gets to remain a snake. Its essence doesn't change just because its skin changes. Assimilation is not like that. Assimilation asks us to give up. I said in an NPR interview earlier this week, I feel like I gave up a part of my soul when I was assimilating. Because it really, to me, is that deep, the things that we're asked to give up. And so, if assimilation truly offered us belonging, then maybe it would be a different story. But it doesn't. And so while we change all these things about ourselves, while we give up all these things about ourselves, we never actually get to attain this other thing that dangles in front of our faces. Most of all, assimilation is a lie.
And so, you and I have these conversations. We're on panels. You're an author, but you're also a speaker. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I do this stuff. People don't realize how much assimilation affects identity. And I would like for you to talk about that a little bit, because I don't think people outside of our community understand the complexity of what it is to be in the Latino, Latinx, Latine spectrum, because we have Black people, white people, Asian people. We have all of the races make up what Latinidad is, and assimilation affects every single one of those people within our community, because we feel the pressure to assimilate so that we can just have peace at some point. But I want you to talk about how that affects identity.
So one of the, so the book is divided into sections, right? The first section is about the lie. So the lie of English, the lie of whiteness, the lie of success. And the second part of the book is about reclaiming our culture, our identity, our history. And in the lie of English, I talk about what it does to us, right? So there are many Latinos in this country who don't speak Spanish, right? And then they're faulted for not speaking Spanish. So assimilation has taken this part of the Latino identity and stripped it from us, although I would also argue that whether or not you speak Spanish or not, that's not the thing that makes you Latino or doesn't make you Latino, right? But there's also a history behind why so many Latinos don't speak Spanish. So in the 20s and 30s and 60s, there were laws that prevented Latinos from speaking Spanish. Students would be physically punished for speaking Spanish in classrooms and in the hallways of classrooms. And so what did that do? That sent a message that speaking Spanish was dangerous, that English is what would offer you protection. And so there was a whole generation of parents who then did not teach their children Spanish because they were afraid of their children facing the same discrimination that they once did. Right? English was also used to segregate us in schools. It's a little known fact that in California and Texas, 80% of schools were segregated by Mexican schools and white schools. And English was the thing that was used to segregate students. They would say, well, it's not that we're segregating you, it's that you don't speak English and therefore we're gonna put you in a different school. But court case after court case would find that many times it was a student's last name that would determine whether they would go to the white school or they would go to the Mexican school. And so, now you have, now not speaking Spanish is also used against us. So first is like, you have to speak English, and then when we do learn how to speak English, then Latinos also have to answer the question of why don't you speak Spanish? You saw it when Julian Castro was running for president in 2020, and in an NBC interview, they asked him, why might someone like you not speak Spanish? And I wanted to scream at that TV and at the reporter and say, you have zero context for this question that you're asking, because the reason we don't speak Spanish is because you took it from us.
Yep. Well, I talk about that in my comedy special because, first of all, Spanish is not our native language. It is our colonizers' language, but they romanticize it, and they made it this. That's why you said you didn't italicize it, because it's not, they do that. And I come from a part of the country where if you don't speak Spanish, so you have to learn how to speak Spanish at home, and then you learn in school, but then in school you got to deal with the hell that is ESOL, right? Does anybody hear me? It's just like, then they
well,
call it.
So my mom, she never wanted to put me in English as a second language classes because in my school, well, first they didn't offer it, but my teachers, because I didn't speak English, they thought of me as less smart. Right? I've always really liked school. Like, I really like taking tests because there's a payoff. Hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me out. There's a payoff. You study, you take the test, and you get a grade. And once you're out of college, you never get grades for anything anymore. It's just like I always have to wonder, did I do a good job? I don't know. So DM me a grade when we're done so that I know how I did. But my teachers, they made me feel like I was dumb because I didn't speak English. And I wasn't dumb. I just didn't have the language skills yet. And now I speak 2 languages.
No, and that's so funny because the people who condemn you are the ones who can't even grasp one. So it's so funny to me. And you know, I just want to remind the BIPOC children here that we are a dream realized for our ancestors to be able to speak English and then get penalized for not knowing it well when a lot of our ancestors didn't even understand English or didn't read. My grandmother didn't know how to read, so we are a dream realized, and I want to remind you of that. In your book, because the book is not just about you talking about your journey, but you lay down you spit bars in this book, right? And I read here, you sent this to me earlier, what became of those first Mexicans in the U.S.? I can't see. Time for a new prescription. But, because this got me in the car, and I was like, damn, my friend is brilliant. What became of those first Mexicans in the U.S. as an unwanted bounty of war has had a lasting impact on the visibility of our struggles in America. By granting those Mexicans citizenship, the U.S. effectively made them legally white, but our rights as Mexicans were never codified in the law. There were no amendments to the Constitution. Nothing explicitly said that as Mexicans we had protections, that we were equal. American citizenship for those Mexicans was a Trojan horse, a loophole of whiteness, leaving it to the courts to decide when our legal whiteness gave us rights or when it was used as an excuse to take them away.
Damn, that was good.
Bars. Because you know what? When you did Truth Serum, you broke down the bounties and all of that stuff with regards to when we were talking about black people in America. And then you talked about the bounty hunters and the history of all of this stuff. Please.
Yeah, so what you read comes after, so you all know there was the Mexican-American War, right? Okay, because usually what happens is history classes, it's like there was a Mexican-American War, and literally it's like 2 sentences, and then we move on, even though the Mexican-American War is an incredibly important piece of history in our country. It was the first time that the U.S. invaded a foreign nation. It was the first time that the United States held the capital of Mexico, okay? That's how far deep into Mexico. This wasn't just a thing that happened in the border. But what the Mexican-American War did is that as a compromise of war, because of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the U.S. had to grant citizenship to the Mexicans that were living in the land that was stolen. Now also, the border, how it was drawn so that the U.S. could have the most amount of land with the least amount of Mexicans. Okay? Because they wanted the land, not the people. Just like now they want our culture and not the people. Okay? But at that time, when this happened, the very first Congress in the US in 1790 said that only white men could naturalize. So what this meant is that Mexicans, most of them who were not white, were getting citizenship at a time when only white people could. So that's why I say, and I didn't come up with this term legally white, Professor Laura E. Gomez from UCLA did. But that's when we became legally white, right? And exactly what happened is that our rights were never codified in the law to say, well, as Mexicans, you as Mexicans can naturalize. You as Mexicans can have right. We sort of were just like swept under the rug of whiteness, and it never really worked out in our favor, because soon after that, all these Mexicans who had land, who were supposed to be able to keep their land was taken away because they were told, okay, you have to go to court to be able to claim your land, but then the court proceedings only happened in English, where clearly these Mexicans had only been American for like 5 seconds, so they didn't speak English, and so their land was stolen yet again. But that is such an important piece of history because of everything that I just said, but also because it really set the stage for the Civil War. Because all of this land that was stolen from Mexico, now the question became, is this new territory, is slavery going to be allowed in this new territory? And so it really precipitated the Civil War. And we just like gloss over that part of history, even though it really tells us so much about who we are as a country. Because, you know, a lot of us understand that the United States was built on the genocide of indigenous people and on the enslavement of Africans. But I think that the third pillar is the colonization of Mexico by the United States. And that part is never really talked about.
Well, I mean, you know, whiteness has only worked out for white people. So
and you know what? And not even for all white people.
No. But and that's what I was going to say, because we also exclude the conversation about class and economics, right? Because at the end of the day, they tell us all of this stuff, but we're really in a war of those that have and those that don't. But I wanted, you and I talked about this a few minutes ago. Everything in history that we've learned, it goes as far as back as our colonization, our enslavement, but the glorious people of our past that were here beyond that, before that, we never learn about, and we have become ashamed of because they shame us for it. In your history, could you share some amazing factoids and information that is character building for Latinos, brown people, Mexicans?
Thank you. So I tell this story in the book that last year, or no, I guess 2 years ago now, I was on this Zoom call was supposed to be like a celebration of extraordinary women. And one of the women, a white woman, was talking about the Renaissance in Europe. And she was saying how Michelangelo and Raphael and all of these artists we know by first name, all of this was happening in Europe while America hadn't even been discovered, were her exact words. And I sat in my chair and I was thinking, should I say something? You know, I should say something. But I also didn't want to be that person who made things awkward and uncomfortable. And so I sat in my chair for a little bit, and then I just was like getting more and more angry sitting in my chair, thinking like, how dare she say this? You know, how ignorant of her to think this. And by the way, this is like common language, right? When America was discovered, I mean, this is why there's still Columbus statues in places that all should be torn down. But so I finally did say something to her, right? And I said, not directly to her, but I just said, you know, there's a really big misconception because indigenous people were not just waiting around, waiting to be saved and discovered. And also, there is this idea that civilization started in Europe with white people. But we had incredibly civilized societies. We had built pyramids that to this day some people believe the aliens built because they're that magnificent. Okay? We had invented chocolate. The Swiss did not, I mean, I love Swiss chocolate, but they did not invent it, okay? We had commerce. We had irrigation. Like, we were a civilized society, and it makes me sad to think, how would those societies have developed without the influence of white supremacy? Because I had a friend ask me, we're not really that good of friends anymore, but I had a friend tell me, or ask me, well, where would you be if we hadn't colonized you? Oh. Okay. He's French, and I'm like, do you know about Cinco de Mayo, where we kicked your ass? First of all. And second of all, it's just, you know, I feel like even in the most well-meaning people, there's still these subconscious ideas and beliefs that we hold as truth. And I'm really glad that I spoke up, even though at the end, afterwards, I was shaking. because it's hard to speak up, because we've been conditioned to not speak up. But I feel like every time we do, every time we speak up, every time we set the record straight, our ancestors do a little dance in heaven.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Isn't it something that discomfort to feel that speaking up, you feel like you're the bad guy and the injustice is being rained on you and you're like, oh, should I say something? You goddamn right you should. So let me ask you this. There's a lot of Mexico in this book because there's a lot of Mexico in you. How does this book serve other Latinos who are not from Mexico?
That's a good question. So the reason there's a lot of Mexican-American history is it's because Mexicans have the closest proximity to the United States and also were the first sort of wave of immigrants to the United States. There are also, it doesn't go very deep, but I do mention several times of Puerto Rican history, because Puerto Ricans have also had a very long history, having been colonized by the United States and continue to be a colony of the United States to this day. But so here's the thing, right? Even though this book is, to your point, from my Mexican perspective, I am also Latina. That's right? And I think that even for people who are not Mexican, we've all experienced similar things. Like the question, where you're from, like the English, the speaking English or not speaking English. Colorism is something that runs in our communities, which is something that I talk about in the book. So all of these things that I, as a Mexican-American Latina, have experienced are also things that other Latino communities have experienced, because we've all been colonized by the same people, and we were talking about this in the green room, and because even though our countries have won their independence from our colonizers, many of us have yet to free our minds from colonization. That's right. And that's not just a thing about Mexicans, that's a thing that runs true in much of Latin America. So yeah, I think that even if you're not Mexican, there's gonna be a lot of things that impact you. And by the way, they also, like all of this history that I talk about and all of these Supreme Court cases that I talk about, and I promise you this is not like an academic book, but I do mention these things, right? And by the way, I'm really grateful for all the academic books that do exist, because I read them so that I could give you the things that I give you in this book. Let me just say that. I forgot what I was saying.
Well, you were talking, because one thing that we do neglect is intersectionality.
Yeah. So what I was saying about the Supreme Court cases is that even though they were, so for example, the Westminster Mendez was a case that preceded Brown versus Board of Education. The little girl who was at the center of this case, she was Mexican and Puerto Rican. And all of these rulings that came out of Supreme Court cases affected not just Mexicans, but all Latino people.
So yeah, no, I think that it's important for us to honor that. Like, when I met you and talked to you about your undocumented story, my father was undocumented. I'm Puerto Rican and Dominican, but the face of immigration is always a Central American face. It's never Asian, it's never Eastern European. Every time we talk about, and when they're talking about immigrants, who they're talking about. And it's always framed as brown people that come specifically from this area. And Puerto Ricans, with their assumed citizenship, being colonized for the third time, and then Cuba with their asylum, they've created all of these subsects of people. And then when I read the stuff that you write, I find out stuff about myself that I didn't even know. So I first of all, I want to say thank you for putting Puerto Ricans in the book, because Puerto Ricans are a cult. But it's like the way you say about language. The Puerto Rican flag was illegal for 9 years, and that's why Puerto Ricans always have their Puerto Rican flag. What are the fun things in this book?
Listen, Ida. No, there is. So this was a balance that I tried very hard to strike, which is that ultimately the book is a celebration of our culture, of our identity, of our history, and one of the best things that someone wrote about the book is that this is a love letter to our people. And when I got that blurb from my friend Jose Olivares, I just sat in my chair for a while and I thought, I think I struck the balance. Because there are a lot of hard things that I talk about in the book, but there's also a lot of resilience from people that we never learned about, that I wish I had known their stories. There's a story that I tell of these teenagers in Texas who were not allowed to be cheerleaders. Only one of the 4 cheerleaders could be Mexican American in a school that was 85% Mexican American. And these girls, they were really just young girls who were fighting for the right to bear pom-poms, created this incredible change. Within 2 years, they had changed the school board to be majority Latino. Within 2 years, they had changed the city council to be majority Latino. So, maybe that's not like fun, but it is really inspiring, to like learn about these women who like created such incredible change and like their story needs to be told, But I mean, I feel like I'm a fun person, so I think that there should be I think the book should read a little fun at times.
It's funny. I'm just, I'm messing with you because it's like telling a woman, you should smile more. Like it comes from the same place, what's fun about this book. You said in the book, I love us, I believe in us. This is going to be somewhere on my desk. We don't need the kindness of the white gaze to celebrate ourselves. We don't need our stories to be translated so white people can see us as human. They are not our saviors, we are. Powerful, right? Powerful. I am a creature of solutions, and so every time I encounter you, you come with it. You come with the stats. You come with the information. I've been on a panel with you and Melina Bobadilla, and it's you guys. You're like, no, this is this. Let's talk about solutions, because the thing is that assimilation is all part of the play when it comes to white supremacy that affects your self-esteem. And it is very damaging to our children to constantly see images of themselves being portrayed as less than. So what are some of the things that you think, some of us know we feel that, damn, I had to assimilate for this, I had to code switch for that. How do we step into our power like you did? And what are some of the things that we are looking toward in terms of solution?
So it's both small and big things. It's small things like speaking up on a Zoom call even though you're uncomfortable. It's wearing this beautiful headband that was made in Mexico that I bought in Puebla even though it's super extra. But it's my book release, so why not?
That's right.
It's also, to me, the biggest transformation for me has come from learning our history. That really has been key because it has shown me that the roots that connect me to Mexico are the same roots that connect me to this land. And I don't have to question my Americanness anymore or my Mexicanness. I can stand on both sides and be fully both things. So it comes from learning that history. It comes from wearing your hoop earrings, because who said that pearls are professional and hoop earrings are not? Mm-hmm. Those rules are outdated, and we have to challenge even small rules like that. It also comes from harnessing our political power. Mm-hmm. There is so much political power in our community. If we showed up, but also if we had the resources to energize our community, right? If people weren't just coming to knock on our doors every 2 years when there's an election, but if they actually continually were listening to us, were concerned with the issues that our communities are dealing with. So it's really like a multi-pronged approach, right? Of small things, of how you assert your own identity in the spaces that you walk into. It's about learning our history. It's about truly walking into our political power. And it's also about recognizing that what you read from the book comes from a section in the book where I talk about certain other books that were written by certain other people that tried to tell the story of Mexican immigrants that became this really successful thing because it was really written for white people, right? Where other writers who write about these things from a personal perspective don't get that kind of attention. And to some degree, it's we don't need the approval of white people to be successful because we are enough within our own community. And if we support each other, there's literally nothing we cannot do, but we have to show up and we have to support. And at the same time, we also need to be recognized by everyone, you know?
So I found my answer for the earlier question is like, how can that book be of service to everybody else who's not Mexican? Because Black American people, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, people from Jamaica can all relate to, you gotta stand up for yourself and speak up. You gotta know your history. You know, like those things are so important and so impactful in how we see ourselves and how we see each other and how other people see us. We also have a lot of economic power, right? So in addition to making this book a bestseller, we have to use our dollars to invest in our communities. We'll go see the Fast and the Furious, but we won't go see a movie with people who look like us. And that needs to change, right? So I just bought this book on Amazon, and I bought a hardcover because I think it's important to support your friends, not just say, like people come to my comedy shows and ask me to be on the guest list and say, I'm gonna support you. And I'm like, that's not support. Support is you bought a ticket.
Listen, even my husband bought a book.
That's right. That's what you do. So who are some of the writers that inspire you?
So for the book, I did like I said, a ton of research, and some of the books that I read, a Latinx and African American History of the United States by Paul Ortiz, incredible book. Manifest Destinies by Laura E. Gomez. She also wrote her next book was called Inventing Latinos, which is also really good. And those are some of the history that inspired me. My friend Reina Grande has a new book out called The Ballad of Love and Glory, which is a historical fiction novel set during the Mexican-American War. And I mean, talk about a fun book where you also get to learn a ton of history because it's a love story, it's a war story, there's a bunch of like really sexy writing and sexy scenes, but also you're getting a bunch of history, so highly recommend that book. And she's just a beautiful writer. I will always read anything by Reina Grande, she's amazing. There's just like so many, and now I don't want to leave anybody out because I don't want them to think that I don't love them the same way, because I do. But I'll stop there with those 3 books.
So I want to ask you if you could go back and talk to young Julisa that was assimilating and thinking that being white was right, what would you say to her?
Oh, I have to find the section in the book. Hang on. If I find it quickly, I will read it. If I don't, I will go with a different answer.
I can't wait to read this book.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, I honed my speech to sound like the popular white girls in my school, like the blonde all-American girls I saw in movies and on TV shows. I stood in front of a mirror, saw my brown reflection, and tried to imagine the girl speaking back to me was someone white, someone whose words brought her pride and confidence. I cry when I think of that, Julisa. I want to hold her and tell her one day she'll laugh when she texts her friends, I'm going star crazy. And they write back, comadre, ¿qué es star crazy? Like stir crazy, but more galactic? She'll respond, we can all be star crazy with a little herb from the earth and roll on the floor laughing so hard her tummy will hurt. My husband, pokes fun of me whenever I make use of the wrong idiom or use the incorrect word in a sentence. He finds it endearing. My friend Carlos has a running list of all the things I say wrong, and we joke about it over drinks in a pool in Palm Springs. In my accent, in my mistaken words, in my imperfect English, I have found laughter and joy.
Aw, I love it.
So that's what I would tell her.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah, I still haven't gotten prepositions. Like, it's just because Spanish was my first language and I learned English second. So I know that we're gonna be wrapping up soon, but I wanna celebrate you because this is bold and revolutionary when you decide to put the mirror to yourself and then tell it. Because it's easy to tell everybody else what they're doing wrong, but it's powerful to say, I remember when I was trying to be white, because a lot of us can remember trying to be white, and people would look at me like, girl, please, like, you can't even try it. Like, if you don't get your brown ass up out of here. I think that, you know, when you said what you would say to yourself or how you felt and you would hold, tell somebody right now who might be experiencing that in this moment. Give them a piece of you that may inspire them to step into who they really are.
I feel like I have said all the things I wanted to say in the book. I really feel so, like, I feel like this, I put so much into this book that I feel like very, like, depleted after it, and I'm just trying to, like, catch my breath again. But here's the thing. Eventually, all of us sort of realize that who we are is more than enough. You know? Eventually, you will look at yourself in the mirror and be like, damn, I am beautiful, I am powerful, I am everything that, you know, there's that sort of, I've seen this on t-shirts and things that says, I'm everything my parents crossed for. You know? And I so feel that in my body that, you know, my dad passed away, and I like to think that he's like so proud of me and so proud of the person that I've become. My mom, even though she thought it was crazy when I left my job on Wall Street to become a writer because of the financial security that job gave me, you know, now she understands why I had to do it. Because at some point, your soul will want to shine through, and you can't, like, contain that, you know? I think that's the thing. Like, you cannot contain the beauty that exists in our brownness. It has to come out. So let it out. Let that beauty out and walk into every room like you deserve to be there, because you do.
Well, damn, you sound like a Mexican-American girl. I want to say, go ahead.
No, I just said good.
Yeah, no, I want to say thank you because I think it's important. I know that this has taken a lot out of you because you've done self-exploration, research. You know, writing a book is really hard, and it takes a long time, and I can't wait for you to replenish so you can help me write mine. But I want to say thank you to you for this, this love letter to the people whose souls need to read it and hear it. And I celebrate you, my friend. I think you are brilliant. You always show up. And I want to encourage every single one of you, you guys, you use social media, go on social media and tweet about this book, post about it on Instagram. We have to stop being performative with our support. We need to start showing up for real. Tweet about it, let people know, put your dollars where your mouth is, and because that is how we get power, and that's how we move forward. I know that we're opening up the floor for Julisa to answer some questions, but I just want to say thank you for letting me be here with you.
Thank you, Aida. And just while you guys are coming up to the mic to ask questions, and I know you guys have a lot of questions, I just want to say thank you to Scripps College and to Pen America for hosting us. It really means so much to be here and for this to be my first event launching my book. So thank you so much to Pen America and Scripps College for having us here tonight.
Hi, thank you. I've been following you since I heard you in Before Times on Crooked Media, and every time you speak, it's what we need to hear. So, I wanted to mention a little-known hero that's just down the road here in this little village of Claremont. I'm one of these plaque readers, and it's a little park at the end of First Street, and it's named the Rosa Torres Park. And in 1941, she desegregated the schools that were Mexican-American and white in Claremont. So there's a little hero just down the road here that's kind of neat, considering you started your tour here.
Great.
So
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
oh, one last question. What's the future? What's your next move?
I will get back to you on that when, when I figure. No, besides my book, I'm working on a few TV and film projects, some of which I'm producing, some of which I'm involved in the writing. So I'm really just excited to tell more stories in different mediums. But there will be another book. I just need a minute after this one. Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for being here. Your whole talk got me emotional, so sorry if I break down into tears. But I've been following you since your first book, and I've loved seeing you grow into the community that you've been building. So thank you for inspiring people to create those spaces. But my question is, also, I love your outfit. Lovely. By holding up our space and trying to reject assimilation, how do we balance the line of not being a white person hater? Of not being what? A white people hater. Like being angry at white people all the time. Sorry. It's just always we have to stand up for ourselves and speak up, and I'm always do I not like white people?
Mm-hmm. No, that is a really great question. Thank you for asking it. So to me, there's a really big difference between white people and whiteness, right? Because whiteness is something that even people of color can embody. White supremacy is something that people of color can embody and propel, right? So there is a difference between white people. Now I'm going to sound like a racist white person. I have white friends. I have so many white friends who I love dearly. So to me, my book is not like an hating white people book. It's about, but it is about trying to dismantle white supremacy and try to dismantle whiteness. And it is also about white people confronting the privilege that they have. And it's not something if you're a white person, you don't necessarily choose to have this privilege that you have, but you should acknowledge that you do have white privilege, that white privilege does exist, whether or not you want it to exist or not. And there are things that white people can do to change it, So I hope that helps. And yeah, and like I said, I have many beautiful white friends.
I do too.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
Hi. I really like everything, your whole outfit and everything. And I got your book this afternoon and I read like half of it already. And it's super good so far. But I forgot my question. 1 second. Okay, so upon seeing the book, I was really drawn to the title, right? You sound like a white girl. Growing up black, but growing up around a lot of white people, this is just how I talk. And then when I would go to like Ohio, like in the inner city, and talk with like my black friends, they would I would find myself kind of code switching to be more black, And so I wonder how you kind of navigate that balance between your assimilated self and your Latina culture.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm really glad to hear that some of the themes in the book resonate. So yes, I do also think, like for example, right, I gave the example of speaking English and then not speaking Spanish. I was in Mexico to present my book in Mexico, my first book, and it was like a dream come true to be in like my homeland. And my Spanish, I'm fluent in Spanish at a 5th grade level, because that's when I stopped learning Spanish, right? That's when I stopped reading lots of books in Spanish. And so my vocabulary in Spanish is limited. And sometimes I don't conjugate verbs correctly or whatever. So I was at this book event, and I, at the end, was signing books, and this woman came up to me, and she tried to tell me all of the things in Spanish that I said wrong. Right? She's like, oh, cuando dijiste esto, like when you said this, you said it wrong, it's actually supposed to be this. And I just looked at her and I said to her, I'm doing the best that I can. And that's sort of my attitude now with any space, right? I'm doing the best that I can. Like, I am who I am. I am a product of my experiences, and my experiences are different than someone who always grew up in California, right? Like, I grew up in Texas, and Latinos in Texas are very different. Well, first of all, many Latinos in Texas prefer to be called Hispanics, not Latinos. And so they're different, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in Texas, and so I was a different kind of Latina than my friends who grew up in Los Angeles their whole lives. And so I think rejecting assimilation, this idea of it, is also rejecting anybody trying to impose on you what it means to be Latina, right? There isn't one way to be black, and there isn't one way to be Latina, and so why should we try to impose on other people those ideals? So you should just be who you are anywhere you go, like whoever you are when you're alone at night, in your apartment, in your dorm room, by yourself. Who are you in that moment? That's who you should be all the time. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Bienvenida. So I'm happy to say that me and my group of friends, we started a book club. And right over there. And we found out about your book through one of my friend's husband. He's like an honorary, not a woman, but he's all about women power. And he's super sad he couldn't be here. But his wife is here, Fatima, and she's the one that told us about this event, so we're super grateful. But I wanted to ask you, you started your writing with the perspective. Did anything surprise you at the end? Did your perspective shift a little? What surprised you about anything new that you got from your own experiences in writing this? How did you end? Like with the new perspective, did it just get stronger, or anything that surprised you about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, there was a lot of things that surprised me as I was writing. I think I realized, there was so many things, but let me think of one specific one. Well, one, I was really surprised by all of this, and I'm going back to the Supreme Court cases, because all the big Supreme Court cases that you hear about, like the really famous ones, they're never like about Latinos or Mexican Americans, right, in this case. But there's so many of them, and it's funny depending on like, so like this big case, I think it was Plyer versus Dope, that basically gave undocumented students the right to go to school and get like a public education. That also, that really surprised me because I didn't realize that in order for me to get a public education in Texas, there had to be a Supreme Court case before that. But there had to be a Supreme Court case in order for me to be able to do that, right? So it was more about, the things that surprised me were, so one of the things that I was trying to do in the book is tell history, but the thing that really surprised me is how much that history is still affecting us today. Mm-hmm. You know, it was making that connection between what happened and our present and what it tells us about the future. Mm-hmm. And that making that connection, the more that I read about these cases, really ultimately provided sort of a through line for the entire book, because our history just doesn't tell us of the past. It also tells us of the present. So that was something that really surprised me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, muchachas. And quiero decirles en español primeramente que muchísimas gracias por el poder latino, de mujer latina, y la voz. And I want to mention also, and that sounded more Spanish to me, so I needed to say it in Spanish, ¿verdad? Also, another thing, quiero decir que si el color rosa era intencional, porque en español antiguamente se decía color Ofelia o color mexicano for the rosa. So it's the Mexican color that we see in all the artesanía. I think that's called crafts, artisan work. We see that pink color is color mexicano. And so it is so significant when I see it. Now, I'm from Mexico. I was raised in this country. And the thing that really resonated with me was that a lot of people say, oh, you sound so white. And I struggled to get rid of my accent. And language became a very strong sense of identity, both in this country and in Mexico. Si no hablas un idioma académico, en Mexico es una perdición de uno. So I purposefully became a Spanish teacher. I teach literature. And my students speak sometimes better Spanish than I do, but I speak literature, okay? Para que entiendan. Para que entiendan. And I got a great compliment. I had a student for 3 years, and he goes, Miss, su español está mejorando todos los días. Míralo. And I said, Damián, te quiero decir también que tú, mi hijo, estás entendiendo la literatura mejor todos los días. So that was a wonderful exchange. And see, that is so significant for our communities, that we are diverse, not only in our culturalization, our refusal to assimilation and to be rehumanized, but also in our language identity, that we are often embarrassed to speak English because we have an accent, or speak Spanish because we're not the academic speaker. So along with the voice, I wanted to ask you this, Julisa. You found your voice to speak out and to say truth, and sometimes it's very dangerous and scary. I want to know how that was in your cabecita, so I can tell my young students, mira, no tengan miedo. What would you say?
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for all of that. So first, yes, this pink is rosa mexicano. Woo! And that's why the color is this pink. And actually, there were some questions from my publisher and my agent that thought, if it was pink and it's girl, would it be like pink too girly? And I was like, but that's not why it's pink. It's pink because it's rosa mexicano. And there was a book that got to me earlier that was slightly off, and I was very concerned, and I think people didn't understand why I was like so crazy about it, but I was like, it's because that color is meaningful to me, and it has to be that exact color for it to be meaningful. Otherwise, it's just pink.
Yes.
Right? This is
Absolutely.
rosa mexicano.
You're one of the few people, I go everywhere and say, el color rosa, porque yo me llamo Ofelia. So they need to know, color Ofelia, when they try to Americanize me and say, oh, we got to change your name. I said, no, no, tú no me bautizaste.
That's right.
Mi nombre es Ofelia.
Yeah.
Or we're going to call you, oh, no, Ofelia.
Yeah.
Olivia, no. And so it is significant. It is a powerful, it is a revolutionary fight color.
Yeah. So now
Mexicano.
I'm gonna answer your second question,
Okay.
which was about so this thing about language, right? First of all, I think that there is so much classism that exists in Mexico, where it's like if you don't speak Spanish in this sort of very academic, you know, what they say like high class, it's like then you don't speak Spanish, and we just need to like completely erase that. Ida mentioned something about Spanish being like the language of our colonizers, which is true. And I also think that we've made Spanish our own, right? And the way that Dominicans speak Spanish is different than the way Mexicans speak Spanish, is different than the way that Colombians speak Spanish. And so each of us has made Spanish our own. And I also think that we need to look at Spanglish as its own language that should be celebrated, because that is also a language that we created. And, you know, not everybody's fluent in Spanglish.
That's right.
So we need to, you know, we need to sort of celebrate that creation of language, because new words are invented every day. So why can't Spanglish words be part of that invention of language? And then your last question, which is about what to tell these students, there are risks that you take when you speak up. And I think part of the reason that I've had so much anxiety about the book coming out is because there are things in the book that I do think will make people uncomfortable. And one of the things that I say that we didn't get to talk about was that I think Latino should be considered a race for purposes of the census. And I think that not everybody will agree with that, but I hope that when you read the book, even if you don't agree with it, you'll at least see my point of view and why I believe that. So it is scary to speak up, but, and sometimes there are risks, you know, I didn't start speaking out about having been undocumented until I wasn't undocumented, because there were real risks of deportation, and I wasn't ready for that. So while I encourage people to speak up, I don't push them to speak up, because each of us has to be ready. And each of us has to know what risk we're taking and whether or not we can take those risks or not. But I do think that sometimes the risk is more of not speaking up.
Yes. Well,
Thank you so much.
That's excellent. Thank you. Muchísimas gracias,
Thank you
muchachas.
so much. Hi. There you
Are
go.
you happy about how you wrote your book? Are you happy about how you wrote your book?
I'm sorry, I have hearing loss, like really have hearing loss, so I can't.
Are you happy about how you wrote your book?
Am I happy about how I wrote my book? Yes, thank you. I'm very happy. It was really hard to write the book. It was really scary at times, but now sitting here, seeing you ask a question, that makes me so happy. Thank you.
And that's what I want to thank you for. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's the perfect closer.
That is a perfect closer.
And you know what, to what you said, because I can't help myself. But I do understand, I mean, I learn every time. I don't want to be around people that I can't get something from, and I don't mean it materially, I mean just spiritually or whatever. I always learn when I'm around her, and it enhances who I am as a person and also as a stand-up comedian. But as you say that, we have made Spanish our own, and even the descendants of slaves in America who speak English, the way that they speak English, and the Latinos who speak Spanish and the way that we speak Spanish, one of the blessings that has come from that is that we've been able to pass along our own history because it's not in the books, right? Through folklore, and my abuelita dándome los tilos, telling me, you gotta drink this grass so that you could get rid of that, and this and that. And I'm thankful for that because it's not in the history books.
It's not. Yeah, thank you. Can I do one quick thing? take a selfie with y'all. Can I do that? Can we go take one?
I didn't know Mexicans had their own pink. I just learned that today.
Thank you so much, Julisa and Ida. Amazing conversation. Julisa will be signing in the lobby, so head out that way and we'll meet you there. Thanks everyone for being here. Good night.